Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to our Finance and Resources Committee on Friday the 19th of January here at Joint Police and Fire Headquarters. Welcome to all members on the committee, elected members, and also the officers who are here today supporting elected members with the issues that are on our agenda today. I'm going to move, and Happy New Year to everybody. I think we can just about get away with still saying that. I'm going to move straight into the agenda. So item 1 is apologies for absence. So I'm not Councillor John Clark. You will know that John sent his apologies. He's on other council business, so I'm substituting for John today and will be chairing today's committee meeting. And we've also got apologies from Councillor Roger Upton, and you're very welcome, Councillor Jonathan Wheeler, substituting for Roger, and I don't think there are any other changes than that other than to deal with the fact that we do have a change in membership. So Councillor Anwar Khan for this meeting will be changed in terms of membership and replaced by Councillor Mike Edwards, and you're very welcome, Mike, most welcome. So I think that is everything. Any other apologies, Catherine? No? Item 2, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest by any elected members or any officers in relation to any items on the agenda? Not seen any indications? No. Item 3 then, colleagues, is your minutes from the meeting on the 20th of October for confirmation. Any comments or questions that colleagues want to raise in relation to the minutes which are on the yellow pages of the pack? Colleagues have to approve those as a correct record. They're agreed, are the colleagues? Yeah, that's agreed. Thank you very much. Item 4 then, with 2 substantive items on the agenda today, the Revenue, Capital and Prudential Code Monitoring Report, and also the budget proposals for 2024-25 through to 2027-28, and our options for council tax as requested by Full Fire Authority. So our first item on the agenda, first substantive item on the agenda, which is agenda item 4, is our Revenue, Capital and Prudential Code Monitoring Report to the 30th of November 2023, and I think Tracy, you're going to open this, and then Mark, I don't know if you want to make any comments as well. I'll hand over to Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Revenue, Capital, Budget Monitoring Report and the Prudential Code that comes on a quarterly basis to Finance and Resources. Section 2 of the report refers to the actual underspend up to November. As it stands at the moment, we're actually looking at an underspend of 606,000 overall. As members may be aware, when we approved the budget back in February last year, we was expecting to spend to fund the budget from reserves, and that was expected to be about 404,000. So it's expected that we won't actually have to make a contribution out of reserves now to balance this budget this financial year. So that means that we're actually 202,000 underspent this financial year as it stands at the moment. In section 2.2, members approved variance last financial year to last quarter to fund some of the improvement projects, and one of the improvement projects was for the BA wash facilities, which is now requested in this report to be moved over from revenue to capital, but still funded from the revenue contribution. So the 202 underspend is mainly within the pay budgets this quarter. If you go to section 2.4, the underspend on whole time pay is around 344,000, and again that's because we're below establishment, but we are actually in the recruitment process, so that will come back in line. As part of this, the overtime is actually overspend. That's because we're actually covering some of this shortfall on the establishment with the ridership and covering that from the overtime budget. The on-call, that's actually underspent at the moment at around 112,000. In October, we actually had an increase in expenditure because of the flooding, and that may continue in the short-term period, so that may change by the time we get to the outturn. In addition, in 2.26, you can see that we're underspent by about 122,000 on non-uniform pay, and again, that's because we're under-established at the moment. Now, there are some intentions that we did add some under-establishments just while we got through the Futures 25. So they're the kind of the main variances that make up the 202,000. So moving on to section 2.2, you can see the financial position at the moment. for the reserves. Within the earmarked reserves that are for the projects that we have earmarked to go forward, we've got about £5.1 million, and the general reserves is expected to be about 5.1 as well, which takes us in a good position at £10.4 million. The capital programme, we've got the capital programme this financial year of about 9.1 million. As at November, we was only spent about 3.2 million. More detail of that can be found on page 23 of the report in Appendix C. The main areas of the underspend is on the appliances within the capital projects. 2.17 actually refers to the aerial ladder appliances that we're actually purchasing. We're actually still doing some work, and hopefully that should be approved and sorted out in late January, but that may result in a £1.1 million of capital being slipped into 24-25, but we'll know more in the outturn report. In addition, if you go to section 2.2 on the report, the fire appliances, as members may be aware, we actually changed the capital programme so that we could get the 17 appliances and delivered into the service. One of the appliances is due to be fully completed by the end of this financial year, but again, at the moment it's still unknown whether everything will be completed by the end of this financial year and may be requested to be slipped. If I can now refer you to section 2.41 of the report. This is the Prudential code. This is the indicators that we have for our borrowing and everything. We have one breach within the indicators, and that's in section 2.43. The total borrowing at the end of the end of November was 32.9 million, and that's slightly above the capital financing requirement of 30.6 million. This is because the borrowing's been taken out earlier to fund some of the programme and to avoid expected rises in interest. We have got a loan that's still outstanding of 3.3 million, and that's actually due in March at the end of the financial year. What we'll do is we'll probably do short-term borrowing just to tide us over while the inflation rates are quite high. So any questions, or over to Mark if you want to pick anything up?
Only on that last element. To me, that's a defensive position in terms of that borrowing in advance that you take to ensure you're smoothing out your interest rates over a period. So again, it's not something that I would sort of say is a financial issue for you. And you can see from the capital programme you've got quite a few options. It looks like the capital spend is going to be there, but some of the timing of it is out of the control sometimes of the force. So you will see a bit of slippage, or it could work the other way, couldn't it? We might need to bring a little bit forward from previous years, but I think fundamentally that longer term position on your capital programme is hitting budget.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you for your hard work, Tracy, and thank you for presenting the report. We're asked to note the contents of the report and also referenced in section 2.28 of our report to approve the transfer of 160,000 that we previously approved for the breathing apparatus wash facilities to the capital programme instead of it being from revenue with a revenue contribution to meet that capital spend. So that's already been partly approved by elected members, and it's just a switch from the big revenue to capital. Are there any comments or questions in relation to this report that you want to raise? Councillor Edwards?
You referred to the spike in October due to the flooding. Do you have a figure of what that spike was? How much?
Not offhand, unfortunately. I can get it to you if you want it.
So the sense of, have we got an assessment yet of whether what's just happened in January has been similar to what happened in October in terms of cost implications?
The payroll's actually just gone through, so we haven't done the budget monitoring as yet. So once we do the next budget monitoring, we'll know the next details.
So it's more about a question than the finance question, but how has it been January compared to
Lee, if you want to add anything? Or?
Sorry, just are you, for clarity, asking what the impact of the most recent floodings have been?
in terms of the amount of time and effort this costs?
Yeah, so we did have a protracted response, particularly when we saw the high river levels on the Trent. So that resulted in crews being operationally active for a number of days across the county. There will be
Was it worse than October or?
I don't know, I'm not aware whether it was worse.
No, I think what we saw probably in the early ones was October is more concentration in the north around Retford. It sounds dramatic, but both incidents weren't necessarily heavy demand on this service, but they were localised in terms of like around Gunthorpe and the Trent. Then October was more around Retford. So you've got a number of streets involved in one incident, for example. We wouldn't classify them all the different incidents, be one incident. But as I say, on-call pay where in terms of spikes, because whole-time pay, there isn't spikes, it's whole-time pay really. The on-call pay when it comes in, because it's unpredictable and they're on-call. But we can get some more information from members council about that.
I think we were a bit surprised at what happened to us on Wilford Lane. Just intriguing whether there's a sense yet that there might be extra burdens on the service on perhaps soakways in a way that's never been expected before.
A lot of what we actually do in terms of like the response to the humanitarian, we wouldn't do a lot of the preventative stuff. We'd certainly be looking for local authorities to kind of do that, but of course where there are impact on say infrastructure, so we think like Electric Avenue around Riverside and everywhere else around there are plans through the local resilience forum around local infrastructure as well, but we certainly didn't see it as far as I'm aware on that kind of activity.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, colleagues. Councillor Butler.
Yeah, just a couple of queries really. Paragraph 2.9, premises costs. It's good to see that there's probably going to be an underspend of gas and electricity, but then what's this dispute over £85,000 for gas? How does that happen? And
Yeah.
Is it a faulty meter or something, or has gone a bit haywire?
There has been a meter change, and it's at the old headquarters, and so they've not been taking meter readings, but we don't, because the headquarters has not been used, they're in dispute about it because obviously there's not been gas there as well. So Leslie in the estates is looking at it and obviously talking to the energy providers, but we do think that we've got a strong case that it's incorrect. But
I know that was a nasty leak, would know by now though.
yeah, so it is at the old headquarters.
Yes. Oh, okay. And then on 2.18, I think I probably possibly only answer this because at the end of the day everything's going up one way and another. But 2.18, the chassis and this new chassis command unit that you're fitting, and just at the end of that line it said this is at 225,000 over the original budget. Is that again? I mean, I know things go up unexpectedly, but is that really unusual, or do we know?
I think some of the specification changed as well during the process of the tender, and also the costs have gone up significantly. I think we did report it.
Or did we?
It was the exception report at SLT, wasn't it?
Yeah, it went to SLT in
right.
November about significant changes. So the transport manager would have presented that report, but
okay.
it was about changing specification and additional costs.
I think when we set the budget for the original build, when we come to look at it, because it's a vehicle that will be used for a number of years, we really want to invest in the best technology and the best capability that we can at the command support unit ensures firefight safety at larger scale incidents. So it was felt that it was worthy of some additional investment for the additional technology and ICT equipment to support the management of incidents.
No, you can understand it just comes as a bit of a shock when you see 225,000 over budget. So it's just
Just to add to Leland, when we put it was an indicative figure when we presented it to members in the capital programme without a specification that was built on. It was just kind of, well, we need to put something in the longer term capital programme, and then that's been refined, and obviously with a 10-year capital programme we've done and nailing down the specification, what I think we're showing you now is a true cost. Okay. Rather than an unspecified indicative figure that went in the budget initially. So,
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, colleagues. Any other comments or questions? Helen?
Yes, just on 2.8, the third bullet point, I know you mentioned the 33k overspend going to mileage claims and full transport costs. You could probably understand the attachments from whole time vacancies. In terms of the allowances / public transport costs paid staff compulsory transfer to the joint HQ, how much of that overspend is due to compulsory transfers to the HQ, and what are those transfers doing, so to speak? Like, is it something that could have been done from another location?
Yeah. Overall, they are the transport costs. When we moved to joint HQ, anybody that had additional time to get to joint HQ from normal HQ and any additional mileage, they got an allowance because it's a change of the contract, and it was for, I think, 2 or 3 years. I don't know whether it's just it might be 3 years, and so it's additional cost to those employees that had additional journey.
So it's eventually going to be phased out then?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Tracy. I'm going to move the recommendations, which are on page 19 of the report. Somebody happy to second the recommendations? All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Those recommendations are carried unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Our next and final item on the agenda is our budget proposals for 2024-25 through to 27-28 and our options for council tax for the financial year ahead. Tracy.
Thank you. Okay. So the Finance and Resources Committee bring this report to you so that you can have some say in what we actually take to the February Fire Authority on the council tax increase. So this report outlines some of the things that happened during the MTFS and going forward into what will be the paper in February. So in section 2, the capital budget proposals for 24-25 to 27-28 are detailed in Appendix A on page 41 in a lot of detail. Not a lot has changed since the MTFS. We've just added 2 things which needed to go in for about 100,000, but the capital programme for 24-25 as it stands is 8.2 million. The main areas, again, are referred to in this report, and in section 2.3, one of the main areas of this 8 million is 3 million for transport costs. And again, this is from the 17 appliances that we're actually purchasing in this financial year and will continue into the next financial year. And obviously the 17 appliances are quite a significant amount of money. After we've done the 17 appliances, we will be delaying the appliance programme purposely to reduce the MRP, which is the debt that goes onto the revenue account. The other area in the capital programme that is a significant amount is £2 million in the ICT, and that is for the control mobilising system that we're doing jointly with Derbyshire. The capital programme will be funded mainly, from borrowing, and the estimated costs of the borrowing have been built into the revenue budget for this financial year and going forwards. So the revenue budget for 24-25 on to 27-28, if you go to page 28, when we reported the MTFS, back to the Fire Authority, there has been some changes with the funding. Although it wasn't very significant, it was just about how the allocation of the NNDR stuff was allocated to the authority. So some of the budget was taken away from the NNDR section 31 grant, which is above the line, and then some of the additional income went into the billing authorities on the NNDR and the top-up grant. So we'll see details of that later. Since writing this report, I just need to highlight you to some of the risks that has come up, and this has come up since writing this report, which is back, it came in January. The employer's contribution for the firefighters, for the pensions, has gone up from 28.8% to 37.6%. So the funding may change slightly to cover this when we get the final settlement. Okay. So turning on to page 30, when we built up this budget, we've actually, at the moment, built it up with a 5% pay award in 24-25, a 3% pay award in 25-26, and a 2% thereafter. And we've done the same as well for the support staff. So again, within this report, we are looking at members to say, do you want that to go forward into February, into the final report? So, moving on to page 32, the council tax. At the moment, we haven't got the council tax settlement from the other authorities because that's not due to come into the organisation until the end of January. So still we don't know what the final income will be. But obviously we've taken estimates into consideration when building up this report. We do get, sometimes we get a surplus or a deficit on the collection fund. And again, that is uncertain at the moment until the final figures come in from the authorities. So since the MTFS, obviously you'll be aware that we were given away the flexibility of having the £5 council tax increase. So again, this report will be showing a 0% council tax increase, a 1.95% and a 2.95%. And obviously the discussions we'll have is whether what we want to take forward into F&R committee. In section 2.47 it does refer you to some of the changes that came out in the autumn statement in November, and again there's details of that in section 2.12. Moving on to the reserves, at the moment we're expected to have about 10.3 million of reserves, and again 5.2 of that is in general reserves. And in the Fire Authority at December 23, we actually said that the minimum level would be about 4.1. So we're in a good position to go smooth through the first financial year in 24-25. Again, the earmark reserves by the end of April are expected to be around 5.1 million. The main reserves in that is a £1.125 million reserve for the budget pressures and to get us through 24-25, and 700,000 to deliver Futures 25. So the finance in the budget, I say the final settlement is expected in February 24, but we don't expect much changes other than hopefully some change on the funding of the pension, which I referred to earlier, which could be a risk. So moving on, the options that we're referring to within this report, again, are the 0% increase, 1.95 and 2.95. And again, some assumptions have been made within these figures that we've got. Again, the pay award, at the moment, if we do a 5% pay award, they've been contained within the figures that we've actually produced in the tables. But if we change that by 1%, that's about £320,000 difference for the firefighters. And for the non-uniforms, 1% would result in a £60,000 change. So within the figures, we've looked at the inflation, and obviously inflation's going down, so we've kind of brought that into the figures as well as estimations the best we can. And we've looked at the council tax base, and we've increased that by 1.3% within the assumptions that we've made. The RSG grant, back in the autumn statement, that was agreed that will come in line with the pension grant will come in line with the RSG grant, and that will then create that we get CPI on the grant. So within the tables, we've got 3 tables, and details of the options are set out within 2.76 and 2.79, and the options of the 0%, 1.9, 5% and the 2. But within this report, if I refer you to page 38, there's a summary at the bottom. So if on council tax band D, it's currently £89.57. If it was increased to 1.95%, the council tax band D will increase by £1.75 to £91.32. And if it increased to 2.95%, it would increase by £2.64. So going on to section 2.79, these are the budget requirements within for 24-25. It's £52 million. If we had a 0% council tax increase, that would give us a shortfall or a deficit of 1.4 million. And into 25-26, that would increase to 3.9 million, so quite a significant amount on 0%. If we budgeted and got a council tax increase of 1.95%, the shortfall would be £825,000 in 24-25, and going up to £2.7 million in 25-26. So the 2.95% option gives you a 525,000 shortfall in 24-25, and in 25-26 gives you a £2 million shortfall. So when we go to the fire authority, obviously we've got to think about what the impact of these increases are going to be. The deficit on the 2.95% is a bit more manageable, and we would be able to meet that out of reserves in 24-25. But obviously there's going to be some significant impacts on services in 25-26 when the shortfall is still £2 million. So over to Mark if I've not picked anything up.
No, I think it's probably unusual for you to be asked to sort of to come with an opinion on something. It's normally as CFOs and accountants would sort of say this is the amount we've put in for the pay award particularly. So, but I think the reason for that is we've had a changing since starting to write the report. We've had a changing climate a little bit, not only from inflation sort of moving down, but also some strong indications from government that they are looking at pay restraint again in the public sector. Clearly, you know, I sort of do a job outside of this organisation and looking around at where and all of yourselves sit in public sector organisations, or the majority do, and you'll be making your own individual decisions over that. And I think we've probably I'm starting to see that there's quite a divergence between what some organisations, all essentially in the same sort of public sector area, are taking for pay awards. I think the highest theme seemingly is around that 5% level, you know, and I think sort of probably October, November time that would have probably been where most of us would have been. But you are seeing now one or two going down as low as 2.5%. So I think as a CFO, and I have to sign off for the robustness of the estimate, but I think I've got a little bit of an area where we can actually look at how we want to present the budget. Obviously the pay award will be the pay award, so this is not going to affect your actual costs in next year, but it is an unknown, and I would suggest that we could probably sort of do anything in a range between 3 and 5%. And still be sort of meet the test that I would put in, sort of saying that's robust. So again, I think it's worthwhile, having a debate like that. As Tracy sort of suggested, moving that percentage down to about 3.75% will probably give you a balanced budget presentation level. But as I say, what actually happens will be what actually happens, and it's we will either under or overspend against that. So it's just about setting that baseline.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Mark, and thank you to both of you for all of your hard work in very difficult circumstances. It's probably just as difficult as it was last year, and very much appreciate the work and the effort that's gone into putting together this report, but also getting us to a point where we've at least got some figures and we know where we're going in terms of presenting to full authority. Just before I throw it open to the floor, I've obviously spoken to Councillor Clark, who is chair of this committee, and obviously has been in deliberation with Tracy and Mark, and also in the various meetings about this, and he's expressed his own view, and his view is shared by me. So I'm going to move the recommendation that we levy a 2.95% increase on council tax. The reasons being,
Yes, inflation I think is starting to come down in part, although actually in the most recent figures we've seen some slight bounce back in elements of inflation. So quite where that will land and how quickly it will smooth out, I'm not sure. There is clearly still an ongoing economic uncertainty. I think that was acknowledged by the government themselves in the financial settlement, only giving us a one-year settlement and not moving to the multi-year settlements that I think were pre-trailed. This clearly continues to be a pay pressure, and I think you're right, Mark. There's a bit of a kind of finger in the air about where pay pressure might end up. I think, broadly speaking, the sliding scale of the 5 going down to the 3 and the 2 over the period is right at the moment. I wouldn't want us presentationally to lower that 5% to get a balanced budget and then actually find that we're on the receiving end of the 5% and we're short and then we're having to come back in year. I think we need to take a cautious and sensible approach to this. We know what the debate was around pay last year. I myself sit in the NJC, so I'm party to those conversations, and I think there'll be pressure again this year. And the final reason that I think, well, the final 2 reasons that I think it's right on balance for us to move a 2.95% council tax increase is that there was a very clear view expressed by the residents of Nottingham and Nottinghamshire last year in the fire service cover review. There was no appetite for frontline cuts and closures of fire stations. That came across loud and clear from communities within the city and within the county. And it's clear to me here, if you look at this, that if we move away from a 2.95% increase, although we are asking residents to make a further contribution, it leaves the medium-term financial plan pretty wide open, actually, towards the back end. Anything between a £3.8 million difference if we had a 0% council tax increase or a 1.3 million % difference in our deficit by the end of the medium-term financial plan. And I think it's also worth us, my final point, just being acutely aware we can have our own views in here as elected members, that the actual view expressed of residents when we consulted them on this in the consultation was that actually they said loud and clear we're willing to pay a little bit more if it protects frontline services. And I think what we are saying here and what we ought to be saying as a Finance and Resources Committee, hopefully cross-party to the Fire Authority, is that this council tax increase, should it be approved by the Fire Authority, will protect those frontline services over the course of at least the first few years of the medium-term financial plan. And then, given this meeting is on public record and that I'm acutely aware that these things often become subject to scrutiny and political debate, quite rightly, because you're asking residents to put their hands in their pockets, I think the other thing, just to be absolutely clear about here, is that even if we ask for and recommend a 2.95% increase in council tax, for the majority of residents in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire who sit under the Band A and Band B council tax figures within our city and county, that's a £1.76 increase in their council tax to pay for protecting their frontline services of the fire and rescue service, or a £2 and 5 pence increase. Put that in monthly terms, we're asking Band A properties to pay 14 pence more each month, or we're asking Band B properties to pay 17 pence more to protect what I think is an incredibly valued service. And I think the issue that Councillor Edwards raises earlier in the meeting around our response not only to fire in terms of responding to fire and protection and our community work, but also the response we've given in terms of floods and working with our partners shows just how valued this service is. So never easy to ask residents to pay slightly more, but I think asking residents to pay just slightly more, as I say, 14 pence and 17 pence for Band A and Band B each month, gets us to at least a relatively balanced position, not only this year but over the medium term financial plan. The other point I'd just conclude by saying is that I think on the pay award, we need to find some way, Tracy and Mark, of saying in our Fire Authority report that the 5, 3 and 2 are kind of best guesstimate assumptions. What I wouldn't want our colleagues who are doing the difficult work for us to assume is that that's the Fire Authority saying what it will be going into negotiations for in terms of the NJC. This is an assumption we're trying to make for financial planning. Obviously the debate around pay awards, as you said, Mark, takes place in a different place and is separate to these figures, but what we're trying to do here is financially plan with the best figures and the best guesstimate that we have got. So that would be my view. I know that is the view of Councillor Clark, having spoken to him, and it's only fair that I did speak to him because he is chair of this committee and he's the person we've discharged with responsibility to lead this committee from the Fire Authority. So that would be my recommendation, but I'm conscious others will have a view as well, so we'll open it up for debate. Mark?
I just say, every option that you look at, even with that maximum increase, leaves with a deficit on the budget. the higher that increase, the lower that deficit, that's obvious, but also if a lower increase than has been suggested, which is the maximum, creates a real significant pressure in the medium term. So from a financial point of view, and actually looking at this from how the funding works, anything other than a maximum increase, and that's probably true for most of the public sector, is effectively a real term cut in your service. And it's at a time when, as you say, we've seen some real local demand increases. So that's a real challenge. At that higher level, because you've got a little bit of an underspend this year, you're not taking this money from the reserves that you've planned in. You've probably got capacity to fund that gap within reserves without making any further cuts that's been identified in the report. I think if you actually go at a lower level than that, I think we might have to look at your chief fire officer to sort of say, well, what reductions in service are you going to, can we make? Because otherwise you're not making a sustainable budget into the future.
I mean, Leela's doing a lot of work for us as well as members know on Futures 25. So we presented with you Futures 25, which is the efficiency and savings programme, and we're working through that. What I am minded of, from an officer's perspective, there's a general election this year that may change things around policy, in public it may not. There is also another in this calendar year, but another draft local government finance settlement that might be on the back of an election and change of government or not. And there may be some better news in that, because as an officer it was disappointing we didn't get the £5 because that would have made a big difference to yourselves as members. That would have made about an additional £800,000 in the budget. That makes it look very, very different. £2 million next year, I'm not concerned, obviously I'm concerned it's public money, but I'm not concerned operation about how we deliver the service, about the projected shortfall for this year. £2 million requires efficiencies in the organisation. I need to make that really clear to you as a chief officer. £2 million is a smaller organisation, and that is likely to impact on your frontline services at £2 million.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chief. Jonathan, and then Mike.
Yeah, no, thanks for the presentation. So your summing up there, Mike, was sort of answered a few of the points, but I'll make them anyway. So of course, when you first read it, and beforehand we go, well, we're asking just to talk about the council increase and not the other part of the pie, which obviously we know when you look at budgets, district, county, you look at the whole pie level, very conscious of potentially recommending either way, whatever increase without saying, but that's what you get at the end of it, which I think is key to do. However, I think it's always, sorry, my voice is going in my head. I suppose, sorry, problem my throat. Yeah, the point on the council tax and the increase overall is that I've never liked increasing council tax. I don't mind saying that, but but at the same time, from a massive view, if it's right doing it, the figures you outline show sometimes it's needed. Just a question, sorry, 2 points while my voice is going to then come back. Is the reason we've said 2.95? I know you can't go 2.99 and 3 because in Cambridgeshire said 2.99 yesterday. Is there a technical reason for that, or just really? Thank you.
I think Tracy and Mark would answer better than me, but from my experience, when we're saying council tax at Gathering, there's always been, I think, a fear and a risk that if you go too close to the 3%, because of the way council tax ratchets up over the bands, you can fall foul of the legislation around the referendum limit. And so I think the kind of best guess advice has always been keep yourself short of that, so that you don't tip into a legislative requirement where a taxpayer could then be saying to the Secretary of State, hang on a minute, this service has breached the limit that's set in terms of legislation. And there will be people out there, because you're right, Jonathan, people have strong feelings about this sort of stuff. There will be people out there who are looking to scrutinise the decisions. So that's why I think we've ended up where we've
That's great. Well, I thought just to get that point there, and thanks to RSQ to bring my voice back. So some people thank you for that, Damien, but I do, so for bringing my voice back, so thank you. Yeah, I mean, like I say, about the council tax increase there, I think in principle, I do support the recommendation, because I think that's issues we need to do to protect the service we have. My thing was always about potential cuts. I mean, you brought that there. The feedback I have from my residents is they are willing to pay a little bit more if it means they're going to have the fire appliance, the fire station open, and having that. A lot of it is the community reassurance. It's what, as you always say, it's the sort of service you hope you never need. You don't want a fire engine up to come to your house, but knowing it's there. And that was a really big thing, especially in my residents when last year's budget, or when we discussed about station was pushed especially. So if we're saying with a 2.95%, we don't believe we have to do any cuts to finance services on top of what we've sent to the future strategy, that would be something that I'd be happy to support personally in terms of taking forward as a recommendation. And in terms of what you said about the pay review, I think you're quite right, we've got to put in for the high, the £5 there, because like I say, I understand probably the point about we can look at the balance budget probably a bit lower, but we've got to be realistic, and the point you made, Michael, spot on, where we don't want to get down the line and have to suddenly, panic's the wrong word, but suddenly look at some cuts without looking at the clear light day because of that. And while the financial situation of the country still it is in terms of inflation, etc., it's going to be very hard to pinpoint down that pay review. So that's what I wanted to say. So it's thank you for your some of them, Michael, before we came to question. I mean, that sounds a lot of points, and that's where currently I'm on the increase.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I should say from my perspective, the chair of the Fire Authority, your view expressed is very, very welcome. I think given what the Chief said about, wherever you stand politically, the political uncertainty of a potential general election, a mayoral election, which may or may not have direct impact on the fire service, but clearly will have some impact in terms of how the emergency services works, and who knows how quickly that deal moves towards emergency services. I think it's so important this year, you've heard me say this before, that we give some political certainty and across the political divide in terms of the fire service and where we're going. So I know these decisions are not easy decisions, and respect the view that you've expressed, but I also really massively appreciate what you've said, and hopefully cross-party support we can get for the budget in Fire Authority. And I think colleagues will have heard, Jonathan, what you've said loud and clear about ensuring some narrative in the report around how taking this level of council tax will allow us to protect frontline services. Clearly it does leave a £1.1 million deficit next year, but thanks to the good officers of Tracy, of Mark, of Becky before us, but also the Chief Fire Officer and colleagues, keeping tight control over the budget, and also some perhaps less predicted things where we've had a bit of a windfall in terms of the end of year position this year. We have got that element of reserves that allows us to just smooth out that position, which hopefully means, as the Chief said, next year we don't have to find those frontline service cuts and closures that we know residents feel so strongly about. So I'm very grateful, Jonathan, for the view that you've expressed and the support for the recommendation. I think that political consensus is really, really important for this year's budget, so I'm very grateful. Mike?
Yeah, in the city we understand why people talk Band D when they do the reports, because that's the 100% sort of figure that everything else is calculated on. But we're always anxious on Band A and Band B because it's 80-90% of the city residents, Band A, Band D. So I wondered if you could explain Table 5 in paragraph 2.76 to me. I can see very clearly that Band D shows both a 1.95% increase and a 2.95% increase. But I wonder if something's gone wrong with the 1.95.
Yes.
Great minds.
Yeah.
We've all spotted that.
You've all spotted it. Oh, well, that's okay then.
Well spotted, Mike.
Well, no, it seems like everybody's spotted it. And it's terrible. I'm watching a programme called Who Done It from the 70s at the moment, and the panel never gets it. So I'm impressed that this panel's spotted the areas. But
We've got a red pen on here.
Oh, we just drew it on, didn't we? I saw it. So within the city, we just have to be careful when people talk Band D, because we have to remember Band A and Band B. That's the story in the city. So you're presumably going to reissue that table in some way, shape, or form. Yeah?
Yes, we'll do.
Yeah, magic. That's great. I mean, I think the thing about the floods thing, right, is just to get that sense of, you've got to keep getting across stories to people of just what the impact of change of incidents is, So, okay, you've got a sense that October spiked, but you haven't got a sense of how much it was. And now we've had January, and we think January's been worse because there's been more affected along the River Trent, but I don't know that, so, I'm prepared to be corrected. But it's just that sense of, that's part of the thing of trying to get across to people, that sense of what it is that we're trying to do. And I think there are new challenges for us in the city that we didn't expect. Yeah. So that's another reason why. And I'd be very grateful for a bit of advice from you on that after the meeting, if you could, please. But yes, and because we just don't know what changes are coming in the next year politically. I mean, I can guess one thing, and don't need to talk about it here, but just that sense of there's a challenge for any new government in terms of what they face financially, and we've seen when people have promised big spending without actually, or big undertakings without having the money to back it up, you trigger a financial crisis. I mean, I was kind of intrigued because on the pension fund, 5 pence, there's a sense of there's legal obligations have changed the reason for how much extra money is needed, but the financial crisis that happened not this last year but the year before, has that triggered any sense of how well the firefighters' pension fund is doing. You're talking about the impact of legal changes, but was there any sense of what the pressures are that have come from what happened in 2022 in terms of what's happened to the firefighters' pension fund?
Are you talking about...
Economic impact of the funding of the firefighters' pension fund of the economic crash that
Well,
was 2 years ago,
is it-
as well as the legal obligations of the McLeod and other legal cases, I think is my point.
I think prior to 2010, when some of the regulations and the review into pension schemes were being done by the government of the day, it was already operating at a deficit like public sector. It doesn't operate like LGPS in terms of like investment fund. It doesn't operate like that at all. It's employer contributions and employee contributions, and it's non-invested, and it's probably operating at something like about a £600 million deficit every year. So the UK Fire Service, rough figures, and I know we're online and there'll be people who will tweet and say that's not actually technically decimal point correct, but the UK Fire Service is funded really around £2.6 billion per year for the UK Fire Service. You put that in perspective of UK Nottingham hospitals are around about £2 billion. So the whole of the UK Fire Service is only sort of like, 50% more than Nottingham hospitals, and 600 million of that 2.6 million is pension support. And of course, Tracy pointed out, the authority gets about £2.3 million per year in a grant to top up to make sure the shortfall in pension contribution. And the work that needs to be done is to find out, has that figure gone up because the employer contributions from 28 to 37%, the likelihood is it probably will be a negative impact. Now we need assurances from government that that shortfall, if it is a further increased shortfall, is going to be covered in the grant. Because if it isn't, the issue is with the Fire Authority. But you have no say over pensions. It's a national pension scheme. You do have a local pension board. I think Councillor Fielding still sits on as an employer representative. So you still have that local pension board that then reports into your wider Fire Authority, but you don't have any say over what you can do over the pension or anything. It literally is a national scheme. I think what you do see, and what we're waiting for is now they're going through a thing called pension detriment, immediate detriment. So all those people that were moved from one scheme to another and shouldn't have been, with age discrimination, your on-call firefighters that are being dealt with currently, there is an impact that is supposed to be underwritten by government, and we need some confirmation that that is going to be the case. But you've built in a reserve as well of about £200,000 into your reserves to cover what we believe would be the most likely impact if you had to find that money. So in terms of economy, not a lot in it. In terms of influencing behaviour in the fire sector, people have left because they've had enough around the pensions uncertainty, and we think across the UK Fire Service with detriment, you may well see quite a large number who take the option to leave as well. But we need to wait and see what that is. Just on your point about the spike, if I could, Chair, that will probably be in terms of pay because of the on-call firefighters, because they're out in their jobs doing it and then they're called in on a pager. The reality is we had a quite quiet summer, so we had no real spikes in summer, but we do have spikes in the winter. But if we have another summer like 2022, then the spikes are in the summer, but we predict that activity anyway. And our service delivery team, response team, keep an eye on that, and then we might have an overspend or an underspend in it. And we usually over the year end up having a bit of an underspend about on call, but we can certainly get you the figures outside of here, Councillor.
Yeah. No, I suppose I wasn't crystal clear enough in the question really. I understand it's a national scheme and you're being given givens, and the givens are listed in terms of what the significant changes. I think there were about 4 or 5 paragraphs point that out. Has at any stage the National Pension Scheme, have they talked about what the impact was on all the things that happened in 2022 with respect to the financial crisis?
I don't really think there is in that sense.
So obviously, both fire and police and what various other schemes that are not funded, subject to GAD valuations. What you've seen over the last 2 years is actually the deficits, because I think all of those pension funds are in deficits. Those deficits have been reduced, not particularly because of financial crisis issues, but what you're seeing now is the impact of the pandemic coming in there. So most pension funds were built on the assumption that the length the length of service that those will be in payment was constantly rising. We've currently got a little bit of that started to flatline, but actually with COVID, actually the average age at which the length of years that the cert payments are in place has actually come down slightly, and that's made a significant reduction in deficits in the national schemes. That's reviewed every year, so that's the one thing that's having the biggest impact. Everything has an impact, but those are the bigger ones.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Any other comments or questions? No? I'm going to move two recommendations then, which are that members, first recommendation, that members recommend a council tax increase for 2024-25 of 2.95% to Full Fire Authority. I'll share the wording of this, Kath, with you afterwards. And that secondly, members endorse the pay award financial assumptions set out in 2.31 of the report.
Yep.
Does that give you, Tracy, what you need, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll move the recommendations. Should we have to second the recommendations? To second it? All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? They're carried unanimously. Thank you very much, colleagues. And that is the final item on our agenda. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you for your time today, contributions, and thank you for your support.
Thank you.